welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We have completed our individual videos for game-by-game predictions for every single Power 4 team and a handful of Group of 5 teams, but today begins our annual Group of 5 conference recap. So from now through Friday, 5 straight days, we'll be bringing you our projected records and standings for every Group of 5 team, every Group of 5 conference, in-depth analysis on each team, projected conference championship games. You want it, we've got it. And today we're kicking things off with the American Conference, which traditionally has been the more competitive of the Group of 5 conferences. You know, the MAC typically not that good. Some Belt hit or miss. Conference USA is, I would argue, the worst. The American is typically the conference that has produced the best teams, the most competitive teams. But some would say it's taken a bit of a hit with many of their members already moving from the conference to Power 4 conferences. So this year going to be very interesting. A lot of new pieces there. 6 new head coaches in the American if you include Blake Harrell at ECU. So 6 brand new head coaches in a conference that to me appears to be very top heavy. You take a look at our projected standings. You look at that. I mean, we've got almost half the conference going bowling. A little over half the conference going bowling, actually, but only a handful of teams true contenders. But I should mention, all the way down to USF, who we have at 6-2 in conference play. I mean, that's only one game separating them from UTSA or Tulane, who we do have in the American Championship game this year. So our projected conference championship will be UTSA versus Tulane. We'll break down that prediction and who we have winning the conference here in just a little bit. But again, it's a very top-heavy conference. The 8 teams that you see here right now, we all have going bowling, meaning the remaining 6 we do not, and we'll touch on them shortly. But let's start with the Roadrunners. This is a team that maybe you see surprised to have at the top of the standings, especially after last year going to 7-6. Very disappointing season for them, but I think they bounced back in a big way. I have a lot of faith in Jeff Traylor, who's a ridiculous 29-3 at home during his time with the Roadrunners, and they have some big home games this year. They host Tulane, they host ECU, they host Army. Some of the better teams that UTSA is going to face this year within the American Conference are coming to San Antonio, which is massive. Owen McCallum returns at quarterback, 9 starters overall returning on offense. They averaged over 33 points per game this year, could top that in 2025. The defense certainly needs some work. They gave up over 30 points per game last year, but I do think they kind of nipped that in the bud. I think they improved quite a bit on that. Factored in with a favorable home schedule and just an overall favorable schedule in general, I think UTSA kind of returns to the form we had been used to seeing prior to 2024. Behind them, we've got Tulane. And if you actually look, we have 4 teams right now sitting at 9-3. Before anybody scoffs at that, last year in the American Conference, we did see 4 teams win at least 9 regular season games. 4 teams won at least 9 regular season games last year in the American. 8 of the 14 members did go to a bowl game, so these records are not entirely far-fetched. But again, UTSA, Tulane, Memphis, Navy, all fighting for that spot at 9-3. But Tulane owning the tiebreaker over Memphis by 1 game, because we do have the Green Wave beating Memphis on the road. The addition of Jake Retzlaff for Tulane was massive. I know he was somewhat inconsistent during his time at BYU, 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, but that is a veteran, experienced quarterback from the Power 4 level that comes into an offense that really didn't have a quarterback entering the season. Pair that with a defense that returns 8 starters from a unit that only gave up 20 points per game last year. Tulane could be in for something special in year 1 under John Sumrall. And remember, last year, they were in the American Championship game. They just fell short to Army in that one. But Tulane does have a semi-favorable schedule. They have a tough one, I would say, in the non-conference. Northwestern, Duke, Ole Miss there. And they do have road games at Memphis and UTSA. I do believe they split those, obviously losing to UTSA, beating Memphis, which means the Tigers are 3rd in the conference at 9-3, 6-2. This is a team that I mentioned in our Memphis video. We actually predicted Memphis and Tulane game by game. Roster-wise, this is not a better Memphis team, but the schedule lines up very favorable for them. Brendan Lewis is going to be hit or miss. He was the leading rusher for Nevada last year. Can he improve as a passer? Can he do so without pretty much any wide receivers? Memphis loses their program's all-time leading passer in Seth Hennigan, a 1,300-yard rusher, and Mario Anderson, and their top 5 pass catchers, along with their top 8 tacklers on defense. So Memphis loses a lot from last year's squad that went 11-2. That squad couldn't even make the American Championship game. I think they fall short once again. The schedule lines up well for them. If they beat Tulane, Memphis is playing for a conference title, but I think they ultimately fall just short. But regardless, still a 9-win season and a shot to get a 10-win season, which is not bad considering everything they lost. Navy and Army right behind them. 9-3 for Navy, 8-4 for Army. I look at Navy, man. This is a really experienced team. really experienced. And it would not surprise me. I mean, one extra conference win in there for Navy, and they could find themselves playing for the American Championship game. That's how good this team can be. I mean, Navy did win 10 games last year, 9-3 in the regular season, beat Oklahoma for their 10th win in the bowl game. Now they return practically everybody on offense, including their star quarterback, Blake Horvath. They return Alex Texa. 5 starters are back on defense for Navy this year. By far the most experienced team they've had in a very, very long time. It's just a matter of, can they handle the month of November? The month of November is brutal for them. I think they could start, 6-7-0, right? Last year they started 6-0, kind of faltered down the stretch. Could see the same thing happening for the midshipmen this year. They, in the month of November, have to go to North Texas, to Notre Dame, play USF, at Memphis, and then, of course, Army in December. It doesn't count towards the conference standings or anything like that, but still a tough game in there. So, at North Texas, at Notre Dame, USF, at Memphis in the month of November. That's a brutal, brutal stretch. The first half, very favorable. Back half, not so much. How Navy handles that will dictate how their season goes. Still have them at 9-3. Army at 8-4. How do they adjust to life without the great Bryson Daly? That's a huge loss. That's a huge loss. And losing Kanye Udo off to Arizona State, that's a huge loss. But get to know the names of Dwayne Coleman and Noah Short. Those are going to be the next 2 big stars for Army. They're going to engineer this offense extremely well. And Jeff Monken always has a strong defense. And that's going to be the case again this year. Army's defense arguably more experienced than they were last year. 5 starters are back from a unit that gave up just a little over 15 points per game last year. So their defense certainly going to keep them in a lot of games this year in what's still a mediocre American Conference. The Black Knights do have to go a very tough road slate at Kansas State, at ECU, at Tulane, at Air Force, at UTSA. So just ridiculously difficult road games. Army will win a few of those, though. We've got them at 8-4, 6-2 in conference play. So a bit of a step back from last year's amazing season, but still nothing that's really that bad. Then USF. That's the last team that could be within 1 game of that top spot in the conference. You look at that and go, wow, 7-5, 6-2 in conference play, though. Look, USF more than likely will start 0-3. So let's just keep that in mind, right? Their first 3 games of the season, all in non-conference, are against Boise State, on the road at Florida, on the road at Miami. So this is a team that I actually think is going to be better than their 7-5 record shows. But they're going to be underdogs in their first 3 games of the season. And the most winnable game of those 3 is probably Boise State, which the Bulls get to host. But I still don't think they can beat the Broncos. So they're probably going to start 0-3. The conference slate, though, is really favorable for them. Byron Brown now returns at quarterback, more healthy than he was last year. They've got a pretty solid offensive line this year. Their top 3 tacklers return on defense, a defense that was horrendous last year. And despite all of that, USF still made a bowl game and won it in 2024. So I think they're going to find a way to get back to a bowl game, clinch a winning season before they even play in the postseason, and again, maybe 1 upset away from playing for a conference title. That's how good this team can be. ECU and North Texas, the final 2 teams that we have making a bowl game in the American. ECU, despite having a worse record than North Texas, ahead of them because we have them at 5-3 in conference play. Major props to Blake Harrell last year. We are considering him a new coach. He was the interim coach for the final 4 or 5 games of the year last year. The Pirates rallied behind him. They made a bowl game and won that bowl game over NC State, which was extremely impressive. 8-5 last year for the Pirates. Now Kattenhauser does return, which is huge for a passing attack that averaged over 260 passing yards per game. Hauser returns. Their top wide receiver, and Anthony Smith, returns. That's huge. But losing a 1,000-yard rusher and Rajai Harris, only returning 2 starters on defense, that concerns me a little bit for the Pirates, to the point where I don't think they can match last year's 8-win total. But to me, this is without a doubt a bowl team. 6-6 for them. Maybe could get to 7-5, but regardless, they will be in the postseason. Very good things to come for ECU. North Texas, same can be said for them. A strong offense once again. They lose a handful of offensive starters, but Reese Poffenberger will be just fine at quarterback. This is an offense under Eric Morris that's averaged over 305 passing yards per game each of the last 2 years. I expect that to be the case once again this year. The key for North Texas is their defense, and that should improve with 9 starters back on that side of the ball. They do have to play Washington State in the non-conference. They have to go on the road to Army. They do play USF, UTSA, and Navy, so a fairly difficult schedule, but 7-5 in conference play for them. We'll find them back in a bowl game, and maybe they can finally win a bowl game. So after all that, those are the teams that we have going bowling. 8 of the 14 teams going to the postseason, going to be competitive there, but again, very top-heavy, because when half your team, when half your conference does not make a bowl game, and when half your conference is going to struggle quite a bit, you can't say it's by any means an elite conference. It's not very deep. I just think it's very top-heavy. Rice, Florida Atlantic, UAB, Charlotte, Temple, and Tulsa all missing out on the postseason within the American Conference. Rice, Florida Atlantic, UAB, we have it 4-8. And a lot of these teams dealing with a new coach. Rice is one of them, dealing with a new coach in Scott Abel. He feels very confident in his squad. He feels that he could have Rice in a bowl game in 2025, which I'm not really sold on. I'm confused with that. They're converting a wide receiver to a quarterback in Chase Jenkins. We'll be curious to see how that transition works for them. They do have an underrated defense. I will give the Owls that, but I just don't think they're bowl quality just yet. But they will be more competitive than I think people realize. I mean, 3-5, that's the same conference record as North Texas, who we have winning 7 games. So Rice, more competitive than people think, still falls short at 4-8. Florida Atlantic, new head coach in Zach Kittley, a great offensive mind. He's going to do well in offense. Caden Beltcamp, transferring in from Western Kentucky, is a huge pickup for this offense, but only 2 starters back on defense for the Owls, a defense that gave up over 184 rushing yards per game last year. The offense is going to give some teams some fits. The defense is going to be their downfall. The Owls 4-8, 2-6, could see them in a bowl game next year, though, because I have a lot of faith in Zach Kittley. Charlotte, UAB. Don't want to forget Trent Dilfer, who's 7-17 during his time with the Blazers. This is a make-or-break year for him, right? This will be his last year in Birmingham if he can't get them to a bowl game. Clearly, we don't think they can. 4-8, 2-6. Kind of similar to Florida Atlantic. I think this is an offense that could do very well. Jalen Kitna has a lot of talent at quarterback. I think he could be one of the better quarterbacks within this league. 262 passing yards per game is what the Blazers averaged last year. But like Florida Atlantic, like Rice, some of these other teams, the defense is going to be their downfall. The Blazers gave up over 34 points per game last year, 213 rushing yards per game. Not sure they can improve much on that. They actually are better than last year. UAB went 3-9 in 2024. We've got them at 4-8, but that's not going to be enough to save Dilfer's job. Charlotte is 3-9. They've got a new head coach. Actually, all the remaining teams left, Charlotte, Temple, Tulsa, all have new head coaches. The 49ers bring in Tim Albin, who left Ohio for Charlotte. That was a interesting move to me. Maybe a lateral move? It surprised me to see him, maybe he thought he reached his peak. He finally got to Ohio. They won the conference championship. They did something they hadn't done since the 60s. He said, great, I've hit my peak. Now I'm ready for a new challenge. He comes to Charlotte, adds Connor Harrell at quarterback from North Carolina. But that's really about it. The 49ers going through a massive rebuild on both sides of the ball. Only 7 starters back as a whole. They went 5-7 last year. We've got them at 3-9. They win 2 conference games, but going to take a while to build this team up. Certainly a rebuilding project for Albin, who I think is a very good head coach. Temple brings in a great head coach as well, Casey Keeler, who had a phenomenal run during his time at Sam Houston, not just in the FCS, but even last year. Helped lead that transition to the FBS and won 10 games last year. So I really am a big fan of Casey Keeler and everything that he's done. He's got an underrated squad. Giovanni McCoy at quarterback, Jay Ducker in at running back, but only 3 starters back on defense. A Temple team that's allowed over 35 points per game each of the last 2 seasons. Gonna take a while to fix that. This is not an immediate fix for the Owls. They went 3-9 last year, got them at 3-9 again this year. But Keeler, a home run hire in my opinion, will get Temple back to relevancy here in a few years. It's gonna take some time. And then Tulsa. Trey Lamb, the new head coach, a phenomenal golfer. I've joked a few times. Maybe he's going to end up being a better golfer than he is a head coach. Time will tell. But Trey Lamb dealing with a massive rebuilding project. The Golden Hurricane allowed, over 42 points per game last year on defense. They now only have 23 combined starts on the offensive and defensive lines. So not 23 on each, 23 combined starts total in the trenches. They're going to get bullied a lot up front this year. Don't have a lot of faith in Tulsa, who was the worst team in the conference last year, shaping up to be the worst team in the conference again this year. 1-11, 0-8 in conference play. That's how bad I think the Golden Hurricane will be. I think the max for them is probably 3-9. So really, who cares? Going from 1-11 to 3-9, it doesn't matter. I think Trey Lamb can get this team to where they need to be in the coming years. But again, this is a massive rebuilding project that is going to take some time, and it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be a quick fix in year 1. So all that being said, what an interesting year it's going to be in the American. We've got 8 teams going bowling. We've got a lot of those teams really just being 1 win away from fighting for a top spot in the conference. So very top heavy, and in the back half of the conference, not so much. Our projected American championship is UTSA versus Tulane. Because UTSA is at the top of the standings, this game will be at the Alamo Dome. This will be in San Antonio, where again, the Roadrunners are 29-3 heading into this year under Jeff Traylor. And I'm going to pick UTSA to win the conference championship. I think Tulane ultimately falls short again under John Summerall. They were there last year, lost to Army on the road. They go on the road again this year. This time they lose to UTSA. I simply think the UTSA offense is going to be too good. I'm curious. I like Jake Retzlaff at Tulane. Is he going to be consistent enough? Is he going to have enough to keep up with this Roadrunners offense? And then Tulane's defense. It's going to be good. It's going to be solid. But do they get worn down? And again, especially worn down if the Tulane offense can't get anything going. So a lot going on here. But with home field advantage, with the better offense across the board, with a great head coach in Jeff Traylor, I think UTSA returns to form. They win the American Conference. They clinch a 10-3 season. Certainly will not be good enough to get to the college football playoff by any means. But returning to form from what we've seen these last few years prior to last year's anomaly, and they still went 7-6. So UTSA beats Tulane, champions of the American once again, in what should be a very intriguing conference in 2025. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. Check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home to our expert picks. Some of the best college football, NFL spread picks in the entire country. Do not miss out on those. Go sign up for those today, along with our weekly newsletters, also over on thegridironexpert.com. Take advantage of it today. Again, become a member of our GE Nation. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.